Hi, everybody. It's me, live from home. Well, not live, but anyway, here I am at home. I tried to do this at school and I was having some issues. So my text might look a little bit different from yours. As you know, we've been reading a lot of Chris Van Allsburg books and we're writing our own story like Chris Van Allsburg. So this is a little bit information about Chris Van Allsburg, one of my favorites if you haven't figured that out. All right, so meet the author and illustrator, Chris Van Allsburg. If you've read books by Chris Van Allsburg before, you know that he writes mysterious stories that leave a lot to figure out. To help, he provides clues through each book. In order to find the clues, you must read the story and look at all the pictures very carefully. What things seem strange to you in the stranger? What explanations can you find in the author's words and illustrations? To explain these mysteries, Van Allsburg says that his stories usually start out with a simple picture or ideas, kind of like what we're doing in class. It almost seems like a discovery, as if the story was always there. He says, the few elements I start out with are actually clues. If I figure out what they mean, I can discover the story that's waiting. It takes him about 7 months to write and draw a book from start to finish. We don't have 7 months, but again, we're not, creating a whole book. We're just creating a story. All right, some of the other books he's written is The Polar Express, which is one of my favorites, Jumanji, The Mysteries of Harris Burdick, and Just a Dream, which I have in the class and I could share with you if you'd like. Anyway, so we're going to read the story. You know that he has those weird, mysterious pieces of his story. I am at home, so if you hear any barking, any noise, it could be somebody in the family or it could be the dog. So bear with me. I was trying to do this at school and I wasn't having any success. So here we go. Let's see. Okay, there we go. And this is the cover, The Stranger. It looks pretty strange. And when we read this, as it was part of our textbooks, their focus would be when a mysterious stranger arrives at the Bailey's house, unusual things begin to happen. Monitor your reading or your listening. If something doesn't make sense, reread it to clarify. So you're going to have the text where you can go back and reread it, or you can go back and listen to me. All right, here we go. It was the time of year the farmer Bailey liked best, when summer turned to fall. He whistled as he drove along. A cool breeze blew across his face through the truck's open window. Then it happened. There was a loud thump. Mr. Bailey jammed on the brakes. Oh no, he thought. I've hit a deer. Let me just see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Nope, I guess. Oh, there we go. So there his truck is driving down the street or down the road, and then he hits something, which he believes is a deer. But it wasn't a deer the farmer found lying in the road. It was a man. Mr. Bailey knelt down beside the still figure, fearing the worst. Then suddenly the man opened his eyes. He looked up with terror and jumped to his feet. He tried to run off, lost his balance, and fell down. He got up again, but this time the farmer took his arm and helped him into the truck. And so there's the man laying on the road. Definitely not a deer. Mr. Bailey drove home and helped the stranger inside, where Mrs. Bailey made him comfortable on the parlor sofa. Katie, their daughter, peeked into the room, and the man on the sofa was dressed in an odd, rough leather clothing. She heard her father whisper, "Must be some kind of hermit sort of fellow who lives alone in the woods." The stranger didn't seem to understand the question Mr. Bailey asked him. "I don't think," whispered Mrs. Bailey, "he knows how to talk." Mr. Bailey called the doctor, who came and listened to the stranger's heart. He felt his bones, looked into his eyes, and took his temperature. He decided the man had lost his memory. There was a bump on the back of his head. In a few days, the doctor said, he should remember who he is and where he's from. Mrs. Bailey stopped the doctor as he left the house. He'd forgotten his thermometer. "Oh, you can throw that out," he answered. "It's broken. The mercury is stuck at the bottom." So there's their daughter looking as anybody would look and be nosy. All right. Mr. Bailey lent the stranger some clean clothes. The fellow seemed confused about the buttonholes and buttons. In the evening he joined the Baileys for dinner. The steam that rose from the hot food fascinated him. He watched Katy take a spoonful of soup and blow gently across it. Then he did exactly the same. Mrs. Bailey shivered. "Brr," she said. "There's a draught in here tonight." The next night Katy watched the stranger from a bedroom window. He walked across the yard toward two rabbits. Instead of running into the woods, the rabbits took a hop in his direction. He picked one of them up and stroked its ears, then set it down. The rabbits hopped away, then stopped and looked back as if they expected the stranger to follow. And this is what Katie's seen from her window. I don't know about you, but bunnies and rabbits out in the wild would run away from me. So let's see if there's clues in these pictures. When Katie's father went into the field that day, the stranger shyly tagged along. Mr. Bailey gave him a pitchfork, and with a little practice he learned to use it well. They worked hard. Occasionally Mr. Bailey would have to stop and rest, but the stranger never tired. He didn't even sweat. That evening Katy sat with the stranger, watching the setting sun. High above them, a flock of geese in a perfect V formation flew south on a trip that they made every fall. The stranger could not take his eyes off the birds. He stared at them like a man who'd been hypnotized. So there, let me move my little picture. But there's those, and you might have seen those birds flying at this time, the geese. So remember, pay attention to the pictures. 2 weeks passed, and the stranger still could not remember who he was. But the Baileys didn't mind. They liked having the stranger around. He'd become one of the family. Day by day, he'd grown less timid. "He seems to be happy around us," Mr. Bailey said to his wife. "It's hard to believe he's a hermit." Another week passed, and Farmer Bailey could not help noticing how peculiar the weather had been. Not long ago it seemed that the autumn was just around the corner, but now it still felt like summer, as if the seasons couldn't change. The warm days made the pumpkins grow larger than ever. The leaves on the trees were as green as they'd been 3 weeks before. One day the stranger climbed to the highest hill on the Bailey farm. He looked to the north and saw a puzzling sight. The trees in the distance were bright red and orange, but the trees to the south, like those on the Baileys, were nothing but shade of green. They seemed so drab and ugly to the stranger. It would be much better, he thought, if all the trees could be red and orange. So look, he's looking on the Baileys, and this is all on the other side. The stranger's feelings grew stronger that next day. He couldn't look at the tree's green leaves without sensing that something was terribly wrong. The more he thought about it, the more upset he became, until finally he could think of nothing else. He ran to a tree and pulled off a leaf. He held it in his trembling hands, and without thinking he blew on it with all his might. At dinner that evening the stranger appeared dressed in his old leather clothes. By the tears in his eyes, the Baileys could tell that their friend had decided to leave. He hugged them all once, then dashed out the door. The Baileys hurried outside to wave goodbye, but the stranger had disappeared. The air had turned cold, and the leaves on the trees were no longer green. Oh, that's when he blows on the leaf. Every autumn since the stranger's visit, the same thing happens at the Bailey farm. The trees that surround it stay green for a week after the trees to the north have turned. Then overnight they change their color to the brightness of any tree around, to the brightest of any tree around, And etched in frost on the farmhouse window are the words that say simply, "See you next fall." So that's when the stranger left. Okay, now we're going to be talking about these questions in class, um, but you'll be having an activity that might have some of these questions in this. So attached to this assignment, you'll see some more slides, just like we did for Jumanji, but a little bit different. I want you to do them the best of your ability and complete sentences and well-formed paragraphs, and do your very best. And we'll talk about these tomorrow or whenever we meet again uh, to discuss the story. But here's some of the questions. It says, what is the Bailey family like? Use details from the story to support your description. What are the first few clues that tell you that something is unusual about the stranger? And in the activity, we'll talk about that. The stranger feels something is terribly wrong when he sees the green leaves on the trees. What do you think is wrong? 4, what do you think the stranger is? Or who do you think the stranger is? List 3 clues that help you guess his identity. So we're going to really talk about number 4 in class. And if the stranger stayed for a while in the area where you live, what effects do you think you would have on the climate? And then comparing and contrasting, again, what does Chris Van Allsburg do to make the story mysterious and amazing? Look at both the words and the illustrations, and we'll definitely be talking about number 4 and number 6 in class. And we'll talk about the character sketch later. Anyway, have a great day, do your very best, and I will see you soon. Bye.